welcome to the program. After 15 months of war in Gaza, a ceasefire deal has now been agreed between Hamas and Israel. In spite of this, Israeli airstrikes on Gaza has continued. But this morning, the Hamas-run civil defense agency said that at least 73 people have been killed overnight in airstrikes in Gaza. Casualties of the strike on the city were rushed to the Al-Ali Arab Baptist Hospital ahead of the ceasefire set to come into effect on Sunday, January the 19th. The strike hit Al-Fala school turned shelter, and news agencies on ground cited spokesman Mahmoud Basal as saying that 20 children and 25 women are among those who have died. That deal, scheduled to be implemented from Sunday, outlines a 6-week initial ceasefire with a gradual withdrawal of Israel forces from the Gaza Strip, where tens of thousands have been killed. Hostages taken by Hamas, which controls the enclave, will be freed in exchange for Palestinian prisoners detained by Israel. As a long-awaited ceasefire in Gaza was announced on Wednesday, displaced Palestinians celebrated, expressing both relief and fear while hoping that this agreement will hold. We're seeing various reactions from several people who have been affected by the 15-month war, Gazans and, of course, Israelis. In the Gaza Strip, many Palestinians are celebrating, hoping the devastating 15-month war is finally over. But for Israelis, the relatives of Israeli hostages also celebrated the deal with cautious optimism. Meanwhile, Israelis opposing the Gaza ceasefire deal set mock coffins in Jerusalem on Thursday, and that's today. They blocked the main road in the city, calling on the government not to surrender to Hamas. The chairman of Gvura Forum, a group of some 300 families of fallen Israeli soldiers who opposed that deal, and a bereaved father himself told Reuters that he fears an agreement with Hamas will bring about the death of many more Israeli soldiers. The ceasefire and hostage release deal that was announced to bring an end to the 15-month war between Israel and Hamas has not been officially approved by Israel's cabinet. But the cabinet is expected to vote to allow the deal to take effect. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office had said the cabinet will delay the planned meeting, accusing Hamas of seeking last-minute concessions. The cabinet had been expected to meet around 11 a.m. local time to ratify this deal, which was announced on Wednesday night.
I'm here to call last minute to the government, to the Prime Minister: don't sign the agreement. Don't sign the deal with the Hamas. This deal, it's a very dangerous deal for the hostages that will stay in Gaza, for the security of Israel, for the safety of the citizens of Israel. I'm Yoshua Shani, the father of Ori Mordechai Shani, that got killed on October 7 in Gaza Strip. For us, it was real. We want to call the government, don't vote for the deal, so it will stay a presentation. If you're going to vote for the deal, unfortunately, it's not going to be a presentation. Many families that don't know yet, but they will need to bury their son like us.
And joining us now is Linda Gratstein, VOA correspondent in Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Linda, for joining us on The World today.
Sure.
Now, when we spoke earlier this week, there was cautious optimism about this deal. We talked at length about it, and now it's been agreed. But still, many are skeptical. What is the mood in Israel as we speak?
Well, I think the mood in Israel is kind of mixed. For the families of the hostages, it's really a roller coaster. You know, will their loved ones be in that first group of 33 who are scheduled to come back to Israel after 15 months of horrible, conditions and kept in captivity? That 33 is supposed to include women, children. There are 2 children who were not part of the first deal, although it's not clear if they're alive, and older people. There are 2 American citizens included in the 33. So it's really been a roller coaster. And until now, Hamas has refused to give Israel a list of exactly who's alive and who's not. There are a total of 98 hostages still being held. 4 of them were from before this war. So of the 94, Israel has declared 34 of them dead, but the number is probably higher than that. So for the families of the hostages, it's really just been a roller coaster.
Belinda, I mean, it's also unclear when we talk about hostages who are alive or dead, whether Hamas knows the whereabouts of those who actually remain unaccounted for. Help us break down the phases of these deals. I mean, especially phase 1, which is expected to begin on Sunday.
Well, first of all, that assumes that the Israeli cabinet actually does meet between now and then and approve it. Israel said, the Israeli Prime Minister's office said that Hamas was trying to renege on parts of the agreement, and so that Israel would not hold a cabinet meeting to approve it until it was clear that Hamas really supported the deal. According to press reports, the debate is over a clause in which Israel has veto power over which Palestinian prisoners will be released. There is expected to be in just this first stage, which is 42 days, 33 hostages will be freed and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, including many who actually murdered Israelis. And so what some people are saying is that it's a bad deal for Israel because Israel is releasing hundreds of potential terrorists to go back to terrorism in exchange for these 33 hostages. During the first stage, Israel is then and Hamas are expected to begin negotiating a more permanent ceasefire, and the goal being a complete ceasefire, a complete withdrawal from all of Gaza, and then freedom for all of the hostages and for many, close to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners.
Linda, this deal, as we said, hinges on the approval from Israelis' cabinets, but they haven't met this morning as planned at 11 a.m., which that meeting was supposed to be held. Have you heard anything about why this meeting has been delayed?
Well, the Prime Minister's office put out a statement saying that Hamas was trying to renege on parts of the agreement and that Israel would not allow that to happen. A Hamas official said, denied that and said that Hamas is committed to the agreement. American officials are saying that they think they will be able to get over these disagreements. The Israeli negotiators remained in Qatar to continue trying to close these last, loopholes. But I think the sense is that both sides have gone too far. The fact that President Biden announced it, President Trump announced it, President-elect Trump announced it, that it's basically almost, taken on a life of its own, and that this is kind of last-minute posturing and that it will go ahead.
All right, but have you heard anything about when we should be expecting an approval?
Well, it will probably not be Thursday. It might be Friday. The one sort of possible wrench is that the Jewish Sabbath begins at about 4:30 p.m. Israel time. So if it hasn't happened by then it'll probably be delayed until Saturday night, which might push off the beginning of the implementation, which is scheduled for Sunday. It might be put off by a day or two.
All right. Thank you very much, Linda Gradstein, VOA's correspondent in Jerusalem. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
We told you earlier about the long-awaited ceasefire deal in Gaza, which was announced on Wednesday. Well, displaced Palestinians have been celebrating, expressing both relief and fear, while hoping that this agreement would hold. From reactions from Gazans, Israelis on the 15-month-old war, the Gaza Strip, many Palestinians are already celebrating, hoping that the devastating war is finally over. For Israelis, they're also celebrating, but with cautious optimism.
Despite their sorrow, Palestinians in Gaza City expressed a sigh of relief on Thursday, one day after a ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel was announced. Still having loved ones buried under the rubble, Nahid al-Jojo said she can't wait to see her relatives who were displaced to the south.
My feeling about the ceasefire announcement is indescribable. My family and siblings were displaced to the south. We are impatiently waiting for them.
Another man displaced from northern Gaza, Mustafa Saab, said he has lost 4 of his 8 children, but feel the joy the ceasefire announcement brings.
I'm
really happy with the ceasefire agreement. All the Palestinian people are happy.
either those who were wounded or those who were not. We shall be happy about this and thank God we reached this stage. People in Khan Yunis were breathing a glimpse of fresh air on Thursday, one day after the ceasefire and hostage release deal was announced. A sense of joy spreading over the southern Gaza city on the backdrop of a gloomy street filled with rubble. Last night's atmosphere was filled with joy. Everyone was happy. Everyone was looking forward to this. We hope from God that this atmosphere continues. The truce takes place and everyone can go back to their homes, be happy and live their lives. On the night the deal was reached, crowds took to the streets of Khan Yunis Wednesday evening as news broke that Israel and Hamas had agreed on a ceasefire in Gaza. People cheered, danced and blew horns as it became increasingly clear a breakthrough had been reached before an official announcement by the Qatari Prime Minister. In Tel Aviv, families and friends of Israeli hostages hugged and lit torches in demonstration, expressing mixed feelings about the deal agreed between Israel and Hamas on the release of hostages from Gaza captivity. Families of Israel hostages held in Gaza gathered in the Tel Aviv square, where they have held rallies for more than a year. They called out the names of the hostages and demanded the release of all 98 who've been held alive or dead in Hamas captivity since their kidnapping on October the 7th, 2023.
It's really complicated because from one hand I'm happy, but on the other hand, I'm gonna be happy just and gonna believe it just whenever I'm gonna see the hostages crossing the border to Israel. We don't know the situation of all the hostages. I don't know if Ofer, my cousin, is still alive or not. I don't know what we're gonna get back. I do believe that he's alive, but I don't know. And I think that it's not going to be completed until we're going to get them, it's not going to be done until it's done, until we're going to get all of them home.
It's too late, but finally it's happened. Let's hope. We say you count the money and the stairs, and now it's only talking. We want to see it happen. I think many people want to see it happen.
Some are, however, skeptical of the physical implementation of the deal. Aaron Cohen is a friend of two hostages taken from kibbutz in southern Israel. He expressed apprehension about the phased deal.
I'm afraid that our government, especially I'm afraid from our government, that they will do something wrong to stop the agreement. And also I'm afraid about the second stage of the agreement, of the young soldiers like Nimrod Cohen here and Matan Zangoker. They should come out as soon as possible. And I'm not sure that the government will be able to do the second stage because of the pressure from the right wing.
After more than 15 months, it's still unclear who on the list is alive and who is dead. The Gaza ceasefire deal outlines a 6-week initial ceasefire phase and includes the gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza Strip and release of hostages held by Hamas in exchange for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Phase 1 entails the release of 33 Israeli hostages, including all women, children, and men over 50.
The United States was very instrumental in getting this deal. U.S. President Joe Biden and President-elect Donald Trump are both claiming credit for the Gaza ceasefire for hostages deal. But this deal was months in the making. In his farewell address on Wednesday night from the Oval Office, President Joe Biden said the plan was developed and negotiated by his team and will be largely implemented by the incoming administration. Let's take a listen.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from the Oval Office. Before I begin, let me speak to important news from earlier today. After 8 months of nonstop negotiation, by my administration, a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas. the elements of which I laid out in great detail in May of this year. This plan was developed and negotiated by my team and will be largely implemented by the incoming administration. That's why I told my team to keep the incoming administration fully informed, because that's how it should be, working together as Americans.
However, President-elect Donald Trump, in a social media post, also claimed a measure of credit for the breakthrough that came after months of stalled negotiations by Egyptian and Qatari mediators with the backing of the United States. It says the ceasefire agreement, which he calls epic, could have only happened as a result of historic victory in November U.S. elections. He had repeatedly warned that there would be hell to pay if a deal was not made by the time he takes office on Monday, January the 20th. Mr. Trump had dispatched his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, to join the negotiations in Doha, and he was there for the last 96 hours of talks leading up to this deal. A senior Biden administration official in a briefing with reporters credited Witkoff with helping deliver this deal, working alongside Biden's envoy, Brett McGurk, who has been in Doha since January the 5th. And more world leaders have, of course, been reacting to this agreement reached between Israel and Hamas. Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani called for calm in the Gaza Strip between now and January the 19th, when the ceasefire deal takes effect. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi welcomed the Gaza ceasefire deal, stressing the importance of a fast delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, on his X handle, welcomed the deal, commending the mediators, and that's Egypt, Qatar and the United States, for their dedicated efforts in brokering this deal. The UN is calling on all to uphold their commitments and ensure that the deal is fully implemented. As for European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen, she says the deal will bring hope to an entire region where people have endured immense suffering for far too long. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says this agreement on the ceasefire and the release of hostages in Gaza, including Germans, is good news and must now be implemented to the letter. But British Prime Minister Starmer calls it a long overdue news that the Israelis and Palestinian people have desperately been waiting for. Change video, Israel, Palestinians, Gaza, French President Emmanuel Macron insists the agreements must be respected and the hostages freed with a political solution found. And more reactions from Russia, who is also in the war currently, but it is welcoming any settlement that leads to security in Gaza after the ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas was announced. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said the ceasefire could pave the way for the eventual implementation of the two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And meanwhile, Ukrainians are now casting a doubt on the quick end of their own war with Russia, the morning after a Gaza ceasefire deal was announced. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians have lost their lives, while Russian casualties have continued to increase. Despite continued Western support, Ukraine has seen some wavering in aid for the US and NATO, while Russia is severely depleted of modern armor that is using North Korean soldiers in Ukraine. Welcome back. We're still talking about reactions on the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire deal, and we have more coming from Stephen Hayes as a partner at Gainful Solutions in Washington, D.C. He joins us now for more on this. Thank you very much, Stephen, for joining us on The World Today.
Good to be with you again. All
right, getting to this point has taken months of painstaking indirect negotiations, not least, because Israel and Hamas completely distrust each other. They still do as we speak. Do you trust this deal will hold and bring an actual end to this war?
I'm not sure that it will. And the reason I say that this is almost exactly the same deal that was tentatively agreed to on May 27th. So it's taken this long to get back to this stage. I think there's a greater possibility of it holding because I think that the U.S. pressure will be greater on one side or the other, but will certainly play a much stronger role than I think the Biden administration did. So I am hopeful, as is most of the world, but I also think there's still a lot of questions, particularly given the delay that came out today earlier.
When we look at the details and the facts on ground, I mean, Qatar, Egypt, and the United States have been major stakeholders in this deal. But we're now seeing the U.S. president and the president-elect are claiming credit for this. In your own opinion, who deserves the credit?
Well, in my opinion, it would not have been possible without President Trump. President-to-be Trump as well. I think both of them deserve credit in the sense that the document that has been agreed upon was shaped by Blinken and the Biden administration earlier, as I say, May 27th, it was agreed to. So it's still the same document, so Biden deserves credit, but I think that if Trump had stayed away from this, I don't think there would be an agreement. I think the Israelis would have continued to step back from this. Clearly, Netanyahu doesn't want this agreement. Hamas may have played their usual games as well, but I think Trump coming in has put pressure on particularly Qatar, Turkey, and others who are involved, in Egypt, who are involved behind the scenes in this.
All right. But while we wait for an approval from the Israeli cabinet, who was supposed to meet today, why do you think the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to this deal?
Well, I think he agreed to it because the U.S., particularly the Trump administration put a lot of pressure on him. Stephen Witkoff met privately with him before Netanyahu would come out in favor of this. So whatever was said by Witkoff to Netanyahu made a big difference. I think that they may have also been a certain degree of reassurance. I don't think it was all totally negative in saying you must take this or else. I think that Netanyahu was probably got some reassurance that if it's not working, then he'll still count on even stronger support from Trump. And I think that's what's really going on. But if Trump had not stepped in, there still would not be an agreement. I'm sure of that.
As we said earlier, Stephen, I think there's still a little issue of trust when it comes to this deal. I mean, if you look at the Israeli cabinet, as it delayed its approval meeting today, was supposed to start at 11. It also said that it will not convene until Hamas accept the terms of agreement. We're now hearing accusations on Hamas trying to backtrack on this deal. Do you think this deal will hold? Or the meeting?
Well, for that reason, I wonder if it will hold. I think that it's possible that Hamas is backtracking, but the problem is that no one knows exactly what are the points that they seem to be backtracking on, if that is the case. No one knows what the exact points that Israelis are objecting to. So until we at least get some clarity on that, both sides are going to be it's going to be a guessing game. And clearly, there's no hope for trust between the two. It probably won't ever happen in our lifetime. But verification is better than simply trust. You've got to have some verification and follow through.
All right, we already know that both warring factions have suffered huge losses since this 15-month-old war began. But from what you know about this war, what you've heard, with this deal, is it a win for Israel or a win for Hamas?
I've thought about this quite a bit. I think both sides could say, and probably will say, that it's a win, but I think both sides could say it's also a loss. And frankly, factions in Israel have said it's a loss. For Hamas, it's a win in the sense that they still exist. I think it is a terrorist organization. It's terrorized its own people. It's been willing to sacrifice 50,000 lives and have not come to any agreement. So but they still exist. The goal of the war was to eliminate Hamas. That hasn't happened. So Hamas could claim victory, but it's a Pyrrhic victory. For the Israelis, they may be getting their hostages back, both dead and alive. It's going to be a slow process because only in the first phase there's only 33 that are assured of coming, and that's going to be over the next 6 weeks. So they can certainly say that it's a victory in that way. They've achieved the goal of getting their hostages back. They also have the 7 weeks to restock for renewal of the war if that happens, just as Hamas will, but it's going to be much, much more difficult for Hamas to restock their arms supplies. Very difficult. So I think both sides can and probably will claim some degree of victory, and I think both sides can easily say they've lost as well.
All right, thank you very much. I guess we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best in this outcome of the deal. Thank you so much, Stephen Hayes, partner at Gainful Solutions in Washington, D.C. Thank you for your time on The World Today.
An honor as usual. Thank you.
Meanwhile, our correspondent, Fergal Kane, also has been traveling with aid convoy from Jordan. The United Nations says the priority now must be to ease the tremendous suffering caused by the war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that UN stands ready to support the implementation of this deal and scale up the delivery of sustained humanitarian relief. His comments are coming as 8 trucks queue at the southern crossing into Gaza. During the 15-month war, Israel has laid much of Gaza to waste, and pre-war population of 2.3 million people has now been displaced multiple times. Mr. Guterres described the humanitarian situation in the Palestinian enclave as catastrophic.
I welcome the announcement of a deal to secure a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza. I commend the mediators, Egypt, Qatar, and the United States of America, for their dedicated efforts in brokering this deal. Their unwavering commitment to finding a diplomatic solution has been critical in achieving this breakthrough. I call on all relevant parties to uphold their commitments and ensure that this deal is fully implemented. From the outset of the violence, I've called for an immediate ceasefire and the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. Our priority now must be to ease the tremendous suffering caused by this conflict. The United Nations stands ready to support the implementation of this deal and scale up the delivery of sustained humanitarian relief to the countless Palestinians who continue to suffer. It is imperative that this ceasefire removes the significant security and political obstacles to delivering aid across Gaza so that we can support a major increase in urgent life-saving humanitarian support. The humanitarian situation is at catastrophic levels, and I call on all parties to facilitate the rapid, unhindered and safe humanitarian relief for all civilians in need. From our side, we will do whatever is humanly possible, aware of the serious challenges and constraints that we face. But we expect our efforts to be matched by other humanitarian actors, the private sector, and bilateral initiatives. This deal is a critical first step, but we must mobilize all efforts to also advance broader goals, including the preservation of the unity, contiguity, and integrity of the occupied Palestinian territory, because Palestinian unity is essential for achieving lasting peace and stability, and I emphasize that unified Palestinian governance must remain a top priority. I urge the parties and all relevant partners to seize this opportunity to establish a credible political path to a better future for Palestinians, Israelis, and the broader region, ending the occupation and achieving a negotiated two-state solution with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security, in line with international law, relevant UN resolutions and previous agreements, remain an urgent priority. Only through a viable two-state solution can the aspirations of both peoples be fulfilled. I pay tribute to the civilians who have lost their lives, including UN personnel and humanitarian workers. And the United Nations is steadfast in its commitment to supporting all efforts that promote peace, stability, and a more hopeful future for the people of Palestine and Israel and across the region. Thank you.
The World Food Programme, the WFP, on the other hand, is stressing the need for secure and scalable access to deliver much-needed aid. If successful, the ceasefire will halt fighting that has raised much of heavily urbanized Gaza, killing over 46,000 people and displacing most of the tiny enclave's pre-war population of 2.3 million. The agreement calls for a surge in humanitarian assistance to Gaza, and the UN and the International Committee of the Red Cross say that they are preparing to scale up their own aid operations. WFP currently has the capacity to send 150 trucks per day, but requires law and order assurances on the ground.